Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. Very excited tonight about my guest. We have Eileen Noonan with us. Eileen is an actress, audiobook narrator, and writer living in Manhattan. She has appeared on Blue Bloods and will appear in the upcoming Billy Eichner romcom Bros from Apatow Productions, as well as season 2 of Gossip Girl. Eileen has written and contributed to the development of numerous devised theater works, including 2 solo pieces, and is currently writing a web series. Everybody, welcome to the show, Eileen Noonan. Hello.
Hello.
Let's go ahead and jump into your story, Eileen. The question I like to start with, the most fun one, how did you choose your name?
I actually am one of those people who, when I was like 8 years old, my parents said if I had been a girl, if I'd been born a girl, that my name would have been Eileen. And that really stuck in my head. And I actually, when I transitioned, I tried to not use Eileen because I thought that was like too cliche to like pick the name that my parents would have given me. But I went for a year by a different name, and then I abandoned it and I succumbed to the gravitational pull of Eileen. I tried to be original, but I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that Eileen was actually just the name of like a nurse that was there when my mom was in labor with me.
Mm-hmm.
So she just thought that was a nice name, and that's what I guess apparently in those days, maybe I'm showing my age here, they didn't know ahead of time like whether they were getting a boy or a girl. So they had like candy cigars of both colors just in case of any contingency.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the story of my name.
And how quickly did you take to it after rejecting that first name? Did it seem to fit with you pretty immediately?
Yeah, it was definitely, it had been my middle name for a while, and then it was like, I made a little post about it that it was, when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, I definitely remember being like, if I could just be Eileen, that would be better somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how or why. So when I did finally like start using it, it really felt like familiar in a way.
That's
So
great.
yeah.
And how old were you when you started to realize that those little things that you'd experienced throughout your life added up to the fact that you were transgender and needed to do something about it?
Needed to do some. Well, I transitioned when I was 32. I had just turned 32. I think I actually decided on my 32nd birthday. We happened to be at a water park, and that was like the last straw for me. We weren't there for my birthday, but it was on my birthday. But the year before that, I remember going to like a David Bowie exhibit. It was a David Bowie retrospective in Chicago of all of his art and all of his costumes and like videos and poems and like weird mime performances that he did. He has a really great one called The Mask, where check it out. But I remember seeing David Bowie in the 70s and being like, oh, he was wearing dresses in the 70s. This isn't a big deal. Like, I don't have to be like, this has been done. It's old news. People have been doing this for a long time, but I just had it in my mind that it was a really, really big deal. So just at that time, that was in like 2014, and I was like 31. I was kind of like, all right, screw it. I'm just going to stop being afraid of this thing. Whatever this thing is, I'm just not going to deny it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, of course, within like a year, I'm on hormones and everything.
Interesting. So did you have a period where you were like cross-dressing or quote unquote, or experimenting with that, identifying that way before you identified as trans?
I never identified as a cross dresser. I definitely did cross dress a lot. I just wouldn't have identified with it because I just didn't like that term.
Mm-hmm. So then when we get to coming out, how did that process go for you?
Pretty good. Yeah. I I will say that like I feel like I was one of those people who was not able to take it slow. Like I'm probably always a kind of a person that when I decide I want to do something, I need, if I decide to do it today, what I mean is I need to have done it like a week ago. and and so it was really similar with transitioning, where it was just like, oh my god, I should have done this so long ago, and now I have to do everything so fast. So I was coming out at work and like changing my name like long before hormones had a chance to do much, or like, and you know what I mean. So and I think I was probably moving a little faster than my family would have liked, but they were supportive the whole way through.
Hmm.
So I remember one night yeah, coming out to my brother, and he was like, what? Okay. And I came out to my parents, and they reacted pretty much how I expected them to, which was that they would be confused, and then they would be very supportive after that. And that's what happened.
Was there a period for you at all of, you know, coming to grips with the fact that you were trans and accepting that in yourself? Or once those kind of pieces fell together and you understood that that's what it was, you're just like, okay, I know what to do, and moving forward?
When I decided that that's what I was, then I felt like I knew what I needed to do. So I don't know. It's hard to say. There was like definitely like a 3-month period where I was going to a gender therapist, and I was sort of talking about it, talking around it, learning about it. So it's a combination of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But who was the hardest person for you to come out to?
Myself.
Was there anybody throughout your process that supported you in a way that surprised you?
My mom, probably. Yeah. And this is a really cool thing. She was telling me the other day, I actually was just home for like the 4th of July in Iowa. And also for my nephew's baptism, Jonah, little Jonah. But I was home, and she was telling me that shortly after I came out, she started like meeting people in and around Iowa, and she found somebody in Dubuque, Iowa, named Rachel. I actually can't remember Rachel's last name right now, but Rachel kind of warned her that like, okay, she's gonna go through like puberty again. Like it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be tumultuous. And I remember as it was happening, times when I would be like on the phone with my mom, like sobbing, and she was just cool about it. She was just listening, and she was just there for it. And I think that's because she talked to Rachel, and Rachel had kind of given her that warning. She never seemed to flinch. And I kind of think that that's cool, that like I still haven't met Rachel, but like before I even heard of her, she was kind of like helping my mom lay the groundwork for being a really awesome mom. And she's been really great. And she actually she gets kind of politically active. She also will she's part of a group called something like Mama Bears, where if there are like teenagers whose parents aren't supportive of them, she will be a mom that they can talk to. She's really kind of gone fully into it. So that's been pretty awesome.
Wow, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, she's just gone all in on it. That is amazing to go to get to the level of acceptance, yes, but then to go beyond that and be like, okay, I need to help other parents through this and show them and teach them how important it is, and how that, in a way, I hope easy it is.
Yeah, I don't think for most people it's not hard unless they make it hard. I shouldn't speak for my mom. I'm sure there was things about it that were hard. I know that at first it was hard for her. It was just, this is a huge change. I think with any change there's some amount of grief, and or denial or things like that. And she was afraid for me, like it's not easy to be a trans person in the world. So that was part of it too. So it wasn't like, yeah, but she got past that stuff pretty quick, and became really supportive.
Were you in a relationship at the time?
I was, yeah.
And how did all of that go?
We divorced after 2 years.
2 years after you came out?
After coming out, yeah.
Well, that's sort of a long time. Sounds like y'all gave it the old college try of working through it.
Yeah, you could say that, yeah.
Were those conversations very difficult, and were there any things that you learned from them that, in retrospect, made it better, worse?
Pass.
Fair enough. That's one thing I did not tell you in the notes as we were leading up to this, that, yeah, anything that you don't feel like answering, that is absolutely, your prerogative. We can move on. Okay. Well, what things did you struggle with most in your transition?
Ooh. Whoa. I mean, this dysphoria is hard, you know. When I first decided to transition, it was the first time I like looked in a mirror and like took stock of like, oh my god, oh no, like I've been really disconnected from my body, so then getting reconnected to my body, and then like learning about my body, and then having to accept my body. That was all really really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think getting transitioning and then like having your marriage fall apart, like and getting divorced, also kind of left me in like really not necessarily a great place in terms of like, am I like a damaged person, and or am I irredeemable? Am I worthy of love? Am I capable of being loved?
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the biggest struggle that I've had. But I am happy to say that, you know, with years of therapy and moving to New York City and making some really awesome friends, yeah, I feel like I've gotten through that for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that when I transitioned, or when I started transition, I'm still like just fairly early in mine. Um, the question of dating was a really daunting one. You know, how to even approach that.
Yeah.
What have you found in that? You know, what have you learned in trying to approach dating?
Uh, I don't know. There was good guys out there. Um, I did finally just start being really intentional about like wanting to try to date trans guys, and that's been cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice to like. I'm straight. I'm attracted to men, so it's nice. Being like, at least my limited experience that I have dating trans men was like good, because it's like he gets it, you know, like this isn't, and you also know that you're not being fetishized in a way that you never really feel sure about when you're dating like cis guys. But
Mm-hmm.
they're not all bad. Like there's definitely good cis guys out there.
Was the attraction to men and dating them, is that something new specifically to transition for you?
Uh, yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess yeah, my sexuality like kind of changed. I would say I was probably pretty bi before, although it turned out that like my ex was not a woman either. So like we thought we were a straight couple, and then it's turned out that neither of us were like the genders that we said we were. So then it kind of like had created this reflection moment for me. Like, have I ever been into a woman before?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, not really. I guess I really haven't. So yeah, um, then when I started like letting myself date guys, I realized that it felt more natural, and it just felt better
Mm-hmm.
um, than dating women ever did for me. So yeah,
Yeah, right. There
I
always
don't know.
seems. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't know if my sexuality changed, or if it was just a deal where like I've already broken this trans taboo. Like I don't need to be afraid of dating whoever I want to date. And then once it's like I started doing that, it was like, oh, I guess who I want to date is guys. Cool.
Yeah, it's a great thing about transitioning. It sort of opens up two things. One, like you've proven to yourself that you can do anything and you can survive anything. And two,
Yeah.
you've broken a massive societal norm and just kind of said, okay, to hell with that. And it's like, well, what else do I need to reevaluate and approach? You know, and it's like I can pretty much look at anything any way I want to.
Hmm. Yeah, that was my experience for sure.
I love how you said, you went through that process of trying to understand, oh, was I ever attracted to women? I think that's kind of a fascinating part of it too, that, was I attracted to women, or was I just like, was it that jealousy, that wanting to be that, and that drew us in, and then, that feeling of it never quite feeling right, it always feeling off, never understanding how other men looked at women and talked about them and seemed to view them that didn't seem to match. Speaking from my experience, was that sort of what you kind of felt?
I don't know about the whole like wanting to be them or wanting versus wanting to be with them kind of thing. Like didn't necessarily. I don't really feel like I had. I think there was probably some women that I like had a crush on that I just really wished I could be, but I never dated them because I was too weird. I don't know, too awkward. They were way out of my league. Um, but in the actual relationships that I had, I never felt like I wanted to be them.
Hmm.
So, and maybe that's because the quote unquote women that I was dating, like, and was attracted to were not women. So they weren't doing it the way I would have done it. But I think it was an aspect of like compulsive heterosexuality where, like, instead of maybe acknowledging I was attracted to men, I instead like sought out the particular kinds of women that I was attracted to, and they also turned out not to be women. So again, I think my experience is different than the way I've heard a lot of people articulate it, though. I never really felt like I want to be her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This one's sort of an ethereal question, talking about the meaning of transition. What does transition look like or mean to you on a deep level?
I really should have sat with this list of questions before I looked at them and I was like, okay, yeah, oh yeah, deep level, all right. But now you're asking it to me, and I'm like, oh God.
It can be a bit of a stumper. Like I said, it's a very ethereal, kind of like a deep question. We can circle back to it if you'd like.
I mean, I think somehow somebody said the other day on Twitter, of course, something to the effect that like maybe transition isn't the right word, like, because it is more just becoming yourself. Gender transition is, I feel like, maybe describes more like what society views what we're doing, because from the outside it looks like we're changing from one to the other, but it's like, actually, this is who I've always been.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just becoming myself. I'm becoming a person, who society sees me the way that I feel myself, but I'm not necessarily the one who's changed. My body has changed, but me internally, I'm different in this. But I also do feel like a very different person from how I was before transitioning. It's becoming. It's being honest about who you are. It's also a medical thing for people who do hormones and stuff, like, or any kind of medical thing. So it's like a lot of transition for me is like seeing a doctor and getting treated, and so there's just so many different aspects to it. On a deep level, it's just about being authentic, I think.
Yeah, I like that. Sort of, it's more about unchaining who you are and letting that out. Than it's about actually changing anything. How far along do you feel you are in your process of, getting who you are out to the public?
I'm fine. I think I don't know. There's things that I guess I maybe would still want to do that I haven't done, but I don't feel compelled to do. Like, I think up to a certain point, I felt compelled by the urgency of like severe dysphoria to do things, and I don't feel severe urgency compelled anymore. And a lot of that's just time. A lot of that's just hormones take an effect and people don't stare at me in a weird way, or just getting comfortable in my own skin. So that's how far I feel.
So you mentioned before dysphoria. Do you still struggle with that in any way?
Yeah.
And when you're in that mode, what do you do to find validity in yourself and just, feel the most Eileen?
Probably cry. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I think I think one thing that I've learned is like just to recognize when I'm getting into useless spirals of negativity. And so it's kind of like, all right, I recognize now that like I could sit here and like stare at certain parts of my body or photographs that just I don't like how I look in them, or whatever, or I can get up and just do something else, so it's just, that's kind of what it is learning to break the cycle of that. And maybe that's a privileged thing to be able to say, because it used to be, again, like a lot more severe, and I wouldn't have been able to do that no matter how much I wanted to. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I would have, but it would have been harder.
I think that there's just a natural aspect to being human where we get kind of down on ourselves, and we do that. We send ourselves down in the spiral. But as trans folks, we have these very specific things to focus on, and these very specific things where we can, I guess, more clearly see. Like you're talking about looking at photos and looking at parts of your body. There are very clear things that we can see and judge very harshly, quickly, because of that the expectations we have. Whereas, as a cis person, like you get to those same ebbs and flows of emotion, but maybe it just feels different. It feels more dysphoric for us because we have those specific items to actually, to focus on.
I guess it kind of depends on the cis person. It's not necessarily like trans people have like a specific shared set of types of pain that like cis people don't necessarily have that, but some of them actually do. And if a cis person, just because they're not trans, doesn't mean there aren't things in their life that they're depressed about that constantly get them down. Things about their body that they hate too. That sort of thing isn't like necessarily unique to trans people. And sometimes I think it's important to acknowledge that, because I know for me, there was a comfort in thinking that my suffering was somehow unique, or that because I was trans, my suffering was somehow apart from the normal human experience. But like altogether, it's everybody has shit. Can I say the S word on this show?
Apparently, yes. No, yeah, it's fine.
Everybody has stuff that they suffer over,
Mm-hmm.
and gender dysphoria isn't necessarily the worst of those things. That's kind of why I enjoy horror movies sometimes. It's like, oh yeah, at least I'm not getting like eviscerated by a man in a ski mask, or a hockey mask. So
It's an
I
interesting
don't know.
example to use for perspective. Okay, I like it.
That's one. It's an extreme example, but people experience tragedies, people experience heartbreak, and dysphoria can be in the realm of that. But I think we got to learn to deal with it the same way cis people do about whatever their stuff is. But luckily, of all the problems that cis people have, one of them is not gender dysphoria.
What have been some of the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome in your transition?
Yeah, probably mental ones, probably mental and emotional ones. And it's just, yeah, I think the hardest thing for me, I kind of talked about this before, but it's just been like coming to believe that I am a lovable human being,
Mm-hmm.
can be loved and am worthy of being loved.
Yeah, that's a major hurdle, and I think it's sort of along the lines of the basic one that we have to get to is that I belong here. I deserve to be who I am and be out in public and be accepted as myself. And then yeah, the next part of that is that I deserve to be loved and be in a relationship where I'm not fetishized and people treat me like a real human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Is there anything in your life that you feel you've been able to accomplish because of your transition?
Yeah, I mean, I was living. Do you mean like if I were still closeted, and as opposed to if I were still closeted, like
Yeah,
because
did it did
I
it
was
open any particular doors for you, or the new perspective on yourself allowed you to take a leap that you wouldn't have before?
it's all tied up in a lot of things happening, at the same time. But like my life has changed drastically since then. Like I transitioned, um, and within 2 years, I went from being a cis guy with a good full-time job, married, owned a house, um, to a single trans woman leaving her job, living under the stairs of a gay man's house. He's a really nice guy. That was just the room that I got, but I love to say that I did live under the stairs. And it was a small room. It was a very Harry Potter thing. Like, God rest her soul, Joanne Rowling. I can't believe she died all those years ago. But
So tragic, so sad.
yeah, just tragically, yeah. And then it was just part and parcel of like deciding I'm going to live my life. I'm going to do what I want to do with my life. And so I was acting. I quit my job. I moved to the Catskills to train at a small theater school in the woods with a theater master, and like that was pretty awesome. And I after that, I moved to New York City, and I got an agent, and I booked a few roles since being here, and that's all been cool. None of that stuff would have happened if I didn't transition. I don't think I would have been struggling and depressed and like probably drinking a lot and wondering what was going on with this feeling that my life is passing me by, and I unlived, and I can't stop. So yeah, yeah. And I've definitely, and everyone, so all of my friends that I have now, all my best friends, are because I transitioned. Like my whole life here wouldn't have happened if I hadn't transitioned.
Mm-hmm. So the answer to that question is everything.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have a particular thing that you've learned through your journey that is a favorite thing of yours?
I feel like I want to say something random, like the platypus is both a bird and a mammal, but I can't think of anything right now. I'm sure there's a lot. A favorite thing that I've learned. I don't know. I feel like I am a repository of useless facts most of the time, but I'm not like calling anything to mind right now.
Okay.
The things that I obsess about are, I mean, I was pretty surprised at like how powerful hormones are. For example, that's always good. Hormones are magic. I didn't know that. And magic is magic. And trans people are also magic. I didn't expect to learn those things.
I love it. As we close out this section, what advice do you have to pass on to young or closeted trans folks out there?
I think that I did see this one in the list, and I thought about it actually. And I think the main thing I just want to say is like, if you know who you are, the battle is like, I don't know, 75% won. At least for me, once I came out to myself, if you actually know that you're trans, then you'll never live another day pretending to yourself that you're not. You won't. You'll understand what you're doing. So hold on to that. Hold on to the power of knowing, the power of the fact that you're connected to a community of people, like I suppose the Transverse and many other like online communities. Because when I was growing up, there was just nothing. There was no real word for it. Every conception that I had about what transness was extremely derogatory, and it was like, it just literally, I thought it was the worst thing that you could be. I thought that what I was the worst and most disgusting thing that a human being could be, and that's because there was no other information. And and there's so much power in that. There's so much power in knowing that. There's so much power in being together, and especially right now when it feels like the world is going down this really, really dark path. I am a person who believes that like our strength is together. Mm-hmm. So just know that. That's my advice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of these wonderful things about your story. We really appreciated having you here.
Thanks.